New data from the U.S. Census Bureau shows New Yorkers are leaving the state in droves, even prompting us to lose a seat in Congress.
New York City, once a symbol of the American dream, is experiencing an unprecedented exodus. The numbers tell a shocking story. Between 2020 and 2023, New York State lost around 630,000 residents, with a staggering 90% of this decline concentrated in New York City alone. This represents more than a 5% drop in the city's population, making it the fastest shrinking state in America. But here's what's fascinating. While locals are packing up and leaving, tourists can't seem to get enough of the Big Apple. The city expects to welcome 69 million visitors in 2024, up by 6 million from the previous year. New York City has become not only a popular destination for tourists, but also for migrants, with free housing provided using taxpayers' money. This creates an interesting dynamic where New York is transforming from a lived-in city to something more like a tourist attraction. The locals who made neighborhoods vibrant and gave the city its unique character are being replaced by short-term visitors who experience only the glossy, surface-level version of the city.
We know the cost of living in New York City has skyrocketed. Pay hikes are not keeping up with inflation.
Living in New York City has become a financial nightmare, even for those earning what would be considered excellent salaries anywhere else. Let me break down the harsh reality. NYC has officially claimed the title of most expensive city in the world, and the numbers are eye-watering. Picture this. The median salary in New York is $73,000, which sounds decent until you realize that after the city takes its cut through multiple layers of taxes, federal, state, and city, you're left with roughly $3,000 monthly to survive on. Now, here's where things get really tough. The average rent for a basic apartment has skyrocketed to $3,400 per month. You don't need to be a math genius to see the problem here. Even if you're making what seems like good money, you're likely living paycheck to paycheck just to keep a roof over your head. And we haven't even talked about groceries yet. A simple sandwich and coffee can easily set you back $20. The building situation doesn't help either. Many New Yorkers are paying premium prices to live in aging buildings that are falling apart. I recently spoke with Sarah, a marketing executive who pays $3,600 monthly for a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. Last winter, she went 2 weeks without reliable heating, and her landlord seemed in no rush to fix it. "I'm paying luxury prices for a third-world living situation," she told me, shaking her head. The tax situation is particularly brutal. New Yorkers face a triple whammy of federal, state, and city taxes, often pushing their effective tax rate above 40% for higher earners. This means that nearly half of what you earn goes straight to the government before you even see it. And what do residents get in return? Crumbling infrastructure, unreliable public services, and streets that haven't been properly maintained in years. Speaking of streets, the safety situation in New York has become increasingly concerning, especially in the subway system where violent incidents have been making headlines.
We do want to begin tonight with the rising crime rate in New York on America's largest subway system, with millions of commuters and tourists riding every day.
The rising crime rates in New York City tell a disturbing story. Random attacks have become frighteningly common. Recent polls show a stark reality. Only 49% of New Yorkers feel safe riding the subway during daylight hours, marking the lowest confidence level in decades. This isn't just about perception. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority's own data confirms the trend. The NYPD's transit crime statistics paint a concerning picture. While certain types of crime have decreased across the city, subway-related incidents are up significantly from pre-pandemic levels. Transit crime increased by 55% in early 2023 compared to the same period in 2022. The numbers include everything from robberies and assaults to more serious violent crimes, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty for daily commuters. The presence of individuals experiencing mental health crises in the subway system has also increased significantly, leading to unpredictable situations for commuters. The MTA reported over 2,000 incidents involving mentally distressed individuals in 2023 alone. This combination of rising crime and mental health challenges has transformed what should be routine commutes into anxiety-inducing journeys. What makes this particularly challenging is that the subway isn't just a transportation choice, It's a necessity for millions of New Yorkers. The average commuter spends about 58 minutes per day on the subway. That's nearly an hour of being in a state of constant alertness, scanning surroundings, and hoping to avoid becoming part of the statistics. Late-night travel has become especially problematic. Many workers in the service industry, healthcare, and other sectors who finish their shifts during off hours face a difficult choice. Risk taking the subway or spend a significant portion of their earnings on car services. This creates a particularly tough situation for those who work late shifts, leading many to question whether staying in the city is worth it. And speaking of transportation alternatives, New Yorkers are finding themselves caught in an impossible situation when choosing between subway and car services.
Well, another big step today toward congestion pricing going into effect after Governor Kathy Hochul unpaused that plan last week.
Transportation in New York has become a lose-lose situation for residents. The subway, which carries over 4 million riders daily, has transformed from a convenient necessity into a source of daily stress. While it remains the most affordable option at $2.90 per ride, the hidden cost comes in the form of personal safety and comfort. Commuters regularly face delayed trains, aggressive panhandling, and the constant threat of crime, all while packed into overcrowded cars during rush hour. The alternative isn't much better. Taking a car service through apps like Uber or Lyft might feel safer, but it's financially crippling for regular use. A typical ride from Brooklyn to Manhattan can easily cost $40 to $50 during peak hours. For someone working in Manhattan 5 days a week, switching to car services could mean spending upwards of $2,000 monthly just on transportation, nearly as much as many people's rent. Now, the city is implementing a new congestion pricing plan that will charge drivers up to $9 just to enter Manhattan below 60th Street. This controversial policy means even those who own cars face increasing costs. Parking itself is another nightmare. Monthly garage spots in Manhattan often cost more than $400, and street parking requires moving your car multiple times per week for street cleaning. The timing couldn't be worse. With subway safety concerns at their peak, the city is essentially forcing people to pay more for driving while offering no real improvements to public transportation. Business owners in Manhattan are already reporting that some employees are threatening to quit rather than pay the new congestion fees or risk their safety on the subway. For families, this transportation dilemma becomes even more complicated. Parents often need to drop children at school or daycare before work, making the subway impractical. But with the new congestion pricing and existing costs of car ownership in the city, many families are finding themselves priced out of both options. Some are spending up to 3 hours daily just coordinating their family's transportation needs. Speaking of families, the challenges of raising children in New York extend far beyond just getting around the city. Raising a family in New York City has become an increasingly difficult challenge, forcing many to make the tough decision to leave. The public school system, which serves over 1 million students, presents a perfect example of this struggle. While some of the city's public schools rank among the nation's best, getting your child into one of these top performers feels like winning the lottery. The reality for most families is overcrowded classrooms, inconsistent teaching quality, and constant budget cuts. Private schools offer an alternative, but at an astronomical cost. Annual tuition at top Manhattan private schools now averages $55,000 per child, more expensive than many prestigious universities. For middle-class families earning between $100,000 and $200,000 annually, private education remains completely out of reach, yet they often find themselves in districts with underperforming public schools. The city's much-touted free pre-K program, meant to be a saving grace for working parents, has become another source of frustration. Despite heavy taxpayer funding, securing a spot feels nearly impossible. The system currently has only 60,000 spots for a population of over 100,000 eligible children. Recent data shows that many migrant families who receive priority placement have filled available spots, leaving long-term residents scrambling for alternatives. Daily life with children in the city presents its own set of challenges. The average New York City apartment, at less than 900 square feet, barely accommodates a growing family. Finding space for children to play safely can be difficult. Many neighborhoods lack adequate playgrounds, and those that exist are often overcrowded or poorly maintained. Parents report spending hundreds of dollars monthly just on activities to keep their children entertained, as free or affordable options become increasingly scarce. The financial strain of childcare adds another layer of difficulty. Full-time daycare in New York averages $30,000 annually per child, nearly half the median household income. Many families find themselves in an impossible situation. They need both parents to work to afford living in the city, but childcare costs eat up such a large portion of one parent's salary that working barely makes financial sense. As more families face these mounting challenges, many are discovering that remote work offers an attractive escape.
The city workers will be able to work from home twice a week under a deal the mayor struck with the city's largest public sector union.
Remote work has fundamentally changed how New Yorkers think about living in the city. The rise of flexible work arrangements has opened up new possibilities for residents who love their high-paying New York jobs but struggle with the city's high costs. A recent survey showed that 65% of New York-based tech and finance workers would consider moving if they could keep their current salaries while working remotely. This shift is already happening. Many former New Yorkers have relocated to places like Austin, Texas, or Miami, Florida, where the same salary stretches much further. In Austin, for example, the average three-bedroom house costs around $400,000, the same price as a small one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan. Property taxes are lower, there's no state income tax, and the cost of everyday items is significantly less. The math becomes even more compelling when you factor in quality of life. Remote workers who've left report being able to afford homes with outdoor spaces, dedicated home offices, and amenities that would be unthinkable in New York. One former Manhattan resident shared that her monthly housing costs dropped from $4,000 for a one-bedroom apartment to $2,500 for a three-bedroom house with a yard in Nashville. Companies have noticed this trend too. Many New York-based firms are now offering permanent remote options to retain talent, recognizing that employees increasingly value flexibility and affordability over physical presence in the city. However, this exodus is creating another challenge for those who remain. As high earners leave, the city's tax base shrinks, making it harder to maintain services while keeping up with rising inflation. The impact of inflation on New York City residents has been particularly severe, with local price increases outpacing both national averages and salary growth. While the national inflation rate has hovered around 3 to 4%, New York City has experienced price increases of nearly 7% across basic necessities. Food costs have risen even more dramatically. Grocery prices are up 12% from last year, with a basic grocery trip for a family of 4 now averaging $250 per week. Salary increases haven't kept pace with these rising costs. The average salary raise in New York for 2023 was just 3.5%, leaving many residents effectively earning less than they did the previous year when adjusted for inflation. This gap between income growth and cost increases is particularly noticeable in everyday expenses. A typical lunch in Midtown Manhattan that cost $12 in 2021 now costs $18. Monthly MetroCard prices have increased from $127 to $146, while the service quality has declined. The restaurant industry provides a clear example of this inflation spiral. To cope with higher food costs and increasing wages, restaurants have raised prices by an average of 15%. A standard dinner for 2 at a mid-range restaurant, which used to cost around $80, now easily exceeds $100 before tips. This has created a situation where even middle-income New Yorkers find themselves priced out of once routine activities. As these financial pressures continue to mount, many are beginning to question what the future holds for New York City. The transformation of New York City into a tourist hub is being further complicated by its evolving demographics. While the resident population dropped by more than 5%, tourist visits are expected to hit 69 million in 2024. Alongside this tourism boom, the city has seen an unprecedented influx of over 150,000 migrants in the past year, with the city spending over $4 billion on migrant services and housing. The homeless population has also reached record levels, with over 80,000 people in shelters, the highest number ever recorded. Hotels across the city are being converted into emergency housing, with over 90 hotels now serving as temporary shelters. This creates an unusual dynamic where luxury tourists migrants and homeless populations are increasingly sharing the same neighborhoods and infrastructure. The signs of this transformation are visible everywhere. Historic neighborhoods are seeing local businesses replaced by a mix of tourist-oriented attractions and social service centers. Local delis and family-owned shops are giving way to souvenir stores and shelters. Even traditionally residential areas like the Upper West Side have seen dramatic changes, with hotels shifting between serving tourists and housing migrants depending on the season. This evolution is reflected in city planning priorities. While major development projects focus on attracting visitors, billions in taxpayer dollars are diverted to handle the growing humanitarian needs. Basic services that residents rely on, schools, sanitation, public transportation, are stretched thin trying to serve an increasingly complex population mix. The economic model is shifting too. Rather than depending on a stable base of resident taxpayers, the city is increasingly split between catering to wealthy tourists and providing services for those in need. This creates a concerning dynamic where middle-class residents find themselves squeezed out from both directions. Looking ahead, this raises crucial questions about what kind of city New York will become.